If you believe you are what happened to you, then your life is no longer yours. It belongs to the past. That sentence sounds dramatic, but Carl Jung would say it's simply precise, because the moment you define yourself by what happened to you, something subtle shifts inside. You stop moving forward, and you start orbiting an old wound. Most people never notice this. They think they're being honest, even responsible. They say things like, "This is just how I am. I can't change because of my childhood. I've always been like this." And nothing about that feels fake. It feels grounded. It feels realistic. But Jung saw something beneath that realism. He saw a trap, because there is a difference between understanding your past and becoming it. When something painful happens, the psyche doesn't respond with philosophy. It responds with urgency. It doesn't ask, "What will this mean for my identity?" It asks something much more primitive. "How do I survive this?" So it adapts, fast, quietly, without your permission. And those adaptations don't feel temporary, they feel permanent. You learn to stay alert, you learn to pull away, you learn to please, you learn to dominate, you learn to disappear. Not because you chose those traits, but because at the time they worked. Jung understood that survival strategies don't dissolve on their own. They harden, they sink into the unconscious, and eventually they masquerade as personality. This is where most people get stuck. They mistake adaptation for identity. They say, "I am distant, I am anxious, I am controlling, I am emotionally numb." But Jung would interrupt and say, "No, you learned distance, you learned anxiety, you learned control, you learned numbness. And what is learned can be unlearned, but only if it becomes conscious. Here is where the real problem begins, because the unconscious doesn't announce itself. It doesn't say, 'I'm reacting because of an old wound.' It simply acts, and then lets you rationalize later. You snap at someone and call it honesty. You withdraw and call it independence. You sabotage closeness and call it intuition. From the inside, it feels justified. From the outside, it looks repetitive. Jung noticed this pattern again and again. Patients would describe their lives as if they were cursed. The same conflicts, the same relationship dynamics, the same emotional explosions. Different people, different places, same ending. And that's when Jung said something unsettling. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Most people hear that line and think it's poetic. It's not, it's diagnostic. Because what is unconscious is not passive, it is active, it reacts, it compensates, it defends, it overcorrects. And it does all of this without consulting your values, your plans, or your future. This is why insight alone doesn't change people. You can understand your trauma intellectually and still live inside it emotionally. Jung called the emotional core of these reactions a complex. A complex is not just a memory, it is not just a belief. It is an emotionally charged system with its own logic. When a complex is activated, you are no longer fully yourself. Your tone changes, your posture changes, your perception narrows. It feels immediate, urgent, personal. That's why logic fails in those moments. You're not dealing with the present. You're reliving an emotional past. And here's the part most people resist. The complex is not the enemy. It was formed to protect you. At some point in your life, it solved a real problem. It helped you endure something you couldn't escape. But time passed. You grew, the world changed, and the complex didn't. So now it reacts to situations that no longer require survival mode. It fires alarms where there is no fire. It prepares you for danger that no longer exists. And yet, it feels real, because emotionally, it is. To live with this inner chaos, the psyche does something else. It builds an interface, a version of you that can function. Jung called this the persona. The persona is not fake, it's practical. It's the face you learn to wear so you could move through the world without constant friction. Strong, competent, pleasant, in control, detached, reliable, whatever earned you safety. But every persona is selective. It highlights certain traits and hides others, and whatever doesn't fit the image gets pushed away. Anger that feels dangerous, need that feels shameful, fear that feels weak, sensitivity that feels risky. Those traits don't vanish, they sink. And Jung gave a name to that hidden reservoir, the shadow. The shadow is not evil, it is rejected life. It is everything you were told, directly or indirectly, that you should not be. And the more rigid the persona becomes, the denser the shadow grows. At first, the shadow expresses itself quietly, through sarcasm, through irritation, through passive resistance. But it doesn't stay quiet forever. It leaks out, in projections, in obsessions, in sudden emotional reactions that feel disproportionate. You don't just dislike someone, you despise them. You don't just admire someone, you idolize them. Jung noticed that wherever emotion is excessive, the shadow is involved. And when the shadow remains unconscious long enough, something deeper takes shape. The wound stops being personal, it becomes symbolic, archetypal. The abandoned child becomes the orphan. The earth betrayed becomes the warrior. The unseen becomes the performer. The neglected becomes the savior. At this point, the past is no longer a memory. It is a structure. And structures don't ask permission. They organize your life. You choose partners that confirm them. You make decisions that reinforce them. You mistake repetition for destiny. This is why Jung was never impressed by positive thinking, because no amount of optimism dissolves an unconscious structure. Only awareness does. And awareness, Jung warned, is not comforting. It destabilizes, it removes excuses, it interrupts automatic reactions, which is why most people avoid it. Because the moment you truly see your pattern, you lose the comfort of blaming the past entirely. And that is where the real choice begins. But that choice is not what most people think it is. And that misunderstanding is where we go next. Up to this point, everything you've heard might feel uncomfortable, but still familiar. Most people can recognize their reactions. They can even recognize their patterns. What they struggle with is the next step, because once you see the structure, a question appears. And it's not a comfortable one. If my reactions were learned, if my defenses were built, if my personality is partially a survival strategy, then who am I really? This is where most people turn back. They retreat into explanations. They retreat into diagnosis. They retreat into labels. Because labels feel safe, they close the question. Jung refused to do that. He believed the most dangerous moment in a person's life is not when they suffer, but when they confuse suffering with identity. Because suffering can end, identity feels permanent. This is why the sentence, "I am not what happened to me," is so disturbing when taken seriously. It doesn't deny pain. It doesn't minimize trauma. It removes something else, the excuse to remain unconscious. Jung observed that people don't resist change because they enjoy suffering. They resist change because their suffering has become familiar, predictable, organizing. It gives shape to their life. The victim knows where they stand. The martyr knows their role. The warrior knows their enemy. But the moment you step out of that structure, you enter uncertainty. And uncertainty is terrifying. That is why Jung insisted on something radical. You cannot heal what you refuse to see, and you cannot choose what you refuse to question. Most people believe choice means control. Jung did not. He believed choice begins much earlier, in perception. As long as you are possessed by a reaction, there is no choice. There is only inevitability. You feel it in your body. Your chest tightens, your jaw clenches, your mind narrows. And in that moment, the past is not behind you, it is inside you. This is why Jung said that trauma is not stored as memory alone. It is stored as readiness. Readiness to fight, readiness to flee, readiness to shut down, readiness to please. And readiness feels like instinct, like truth, like this is just who I am. But Jung would say, no, this is who you learn to be under pressure. And what was learned under pressure can be relearned under awareness. Here is where the misunderstanding begins. People hear Jung talk about consciousness, and they imagine self-control, they imagine discipline, they imagine willpower. Jung meant none of that. He meant the ability to hold an inner tension without immediately acting it out. To notice anger without becoming it. To notice fear without obeying it. To notice the urge to withdraw without disappearing. This sounds simple. It is not. Because the psyche does not give up control easily, especially when it believes control is survival. When you interrupt a reaction, the complex fights back, not violently, subtly. It produces thoughts, justifications, stories. He deserves it. It's pointless anyway. This always happens. I know how this ends. And if you're not careful, you mistake those thoughts for insight. Jung warned about this. He said the unconscious is clever. It doesn't oppose consciousness directly. It seduces it. This is why true awareness feels destabilizing. It removes the familiar explanations before offering new ground. You feel exposed, unguarded, momentarily without an identity, and that is exactly the point, because the self that was built to survive cannot guide you into a life that requires choice. This is where Jung introduces a dangerous idea. He believed that beneath the persona and the shadow, there is something else, not a role, not a wound, not a reaction, a center. He called it the self. The self is not the ego. It is not the story you tell yourself. It is the organizing principle of your psyche. And it does not speak in sentences. It speaks in tension, in symbols, in discomfort. The self appears when you are no longer fully identified with either your mask or your wound. Most people never experience this consciously. They live their entire lives oscillating between persona and shadow, trying to maintain control, trying to suppress impulses, trying to fix themselves. Jung saw this as a mistake. You don't integrate the shadow by eliminating it. You integrate it by allowing it to become conscious without letting it dominate. This is the moment choice becomes possible. Not because the past disappears, but because it stops hijacking the present. This is where the sentence, "I am what I chose to become," finally makes sense. It does not mean choosing happiness. It does not mean choosing confidence. It does not mean choosing a new identity. It means choosing awareness over possession, choosing to see the reaction instead of becoming it, choosing to feel the emotion instead of acting it out. This choice is subtle, almost invisible, and because it is subtle, it is easy to underestimate. But Jung believed this moment was the turning point of a human life, because from here, the psyche reorganizes, slowly, painfully, honestly. The archetype loosens its grip. The complex loses energy. The persona becomes flexible, not because you forced it, but because it is no longer needed in the same way. However, Jung also warned of something else. When awareness begins, resistance increases. The psyche will test you. It will create situations that provoke the old reaction, not to punish you, but to see if the new consciousness holds. This is where most people relapse. They interpret the test as failure. They say, "See, I haven't changed." Jung would say, "No, you are being initiated." Because consciousness is not proven in calm moments. It is proven under pressure, and this is where the real danger appears. Not the past, not the trauma, not the complex, but the temptation to return to the familiar identity. The identity that explains everything. The identity that requires no choice. This is why Jung said people cling to their suffering more than they admit. Because suffering, once integrated into identity, removes responsibility. And responsibility is heavier than pain. The moment you realize you are not what happened to you, you also realize something else. You are responsible for what you do with it. And that realization changes everything. But it also isolates you, because once you step out of unconscious repetition, you no longer belong fully to the world you came from. And that is the cost of becoming conscious. This is where most narratives stop. They offer relief. They offer closure. They offer hope. Jung did something different. He asked, what happens after, you see? What happens when awareness destabilizes your life before it reorganizes it? What happens when you can no longer hide behind the past, but the future has not formed yet? That is where we go next. There is a moment Jung described that most people never talk about, not because it is rare, but because it is unbearable to stay in. It is the moment after awareness begins, but before a new structure forms. The old identity no longer fits. The old explanations no longer work, but nothing solid has replaced them yet. This is not freedom, this is emptiness. And emptiness is where most people turn back. They say they want change, but what they really want is relief. They want the pain to stop without losing the identity that organized their life. Jung saw this again and again. Patients would reach insight, recognize their patterns, even understand their complexes, and then panic, because insight removes the narrative that once made suffering meaningful. The victim story dissolves, the justification weakens, the old roles lose clarity, and suddenly the question is no longer, why did this happen to me? It becomes, what am I going to do now? That question carries weight, because now the answer cannot be blamed on the past. This is why Jung said that consciousness increases responsibility, not moral responsibility, existential responsibility. You are no longer innocent, but you are not yet whole. This in-between state feels dangerous. You may feel more anxious than before, more disoriented, less certain. And many people mistake this for regression. They say, I was better before I started thinking about this. I opened something I shouldn't have. I should just go back to how I was. Jung warned that this moment is critical because the psyche hates instability. If you don't consciously tolerate this tension, the unconscious will rush to resolve it for you. And it will resolve it in the fastest way possible, by rebuilding the old identity. This is why people return to toxic relationships right after moments of clarity, why they sabotage progress just as things start to change, why they cling to familiar suffering instead of facing unfamiliar responsibility. The unconscious prefers pain it understands over freedom it cannot predict. Jung did not romanticize this process. He was clear. Individuation, the process of becoming oneself, is not comfortable. It is not quick, and it is not safe for the ego, because the ego wants certainty, the self wants wholeness, and those two rarely agree. At this stage, archetypes become louder. The warrior demands action, the savior demands purpose, the orphan demands protection, the shadow demands expression. Everything inside you wants resolution, and resolution feels urgent, but Jung insisted on something radical. Do not resolve it too quickly, because premature resolution is how people turn insight into ideology. They replace one identity with another, one story with a new story, one mask with a different mask. They say, now I am healed. Now I am awakened. Now I know who I am. And Jung would quietly shake his head, because certainty at this stage is a defense. True integration does not produce certainty. It produces humility. It produces a strange state where you are less reactive, but also less sure, less dramatic, but more real. This is the stage where symbols begin to appear, dreams intensify, images repeat, certain themes keep returning. Jung paid close attention to this because he believed the psyche speaks symbolically when rational identity dissolves. You may dream of houses, rooms you've never seen, locked doors, basements, attics. You may dream of journeys, of being late, of missing trains, of searching for something unnamed. These are not random. They are maps of a psyche reorganizing itself. The house is you. The rooms are aspects of your life. The locked spaces are parts you avoided. The journey is the movement toward wholeness. Jung believed that when identity loosens, the self begins to guide, not through logic, but through image and tension. This is why the middle phase feels chaotic, because guidance is no longer external, but it is not yet conscious either. You are learning to listen differently. Most people never stay here long enough. They rush back into roles, back into certainty, back into explanations. But those who stay notice something subtle, their reactions. Slow down, not disappear, slow down. There is a pause between stimulus and response, and inside that pause, the old compulsion weakens. This is where choice becomes real, not the kind of choice that feels powerful, the kind that feels awkward. You want to react, but you don't. You want to explain yourself, but you don't. You want to retreat, but you stay. This does not feel heroic. It feels exposed. And yet, something shifts. The complex no longer fully possesses you. The archetype no longer fully directs you. The persona loosens its grip, not because you fought them, but because you no longer mistake them for yourself. Jung believed this moment is the true beginning of freedom, not happiness, not success. Freedom. Because freedom is not doing what you want. It is no longer being compelled to repeat what you did not choose. But Jung also warned, this freedom comes with loss. You lose the comfort of innocence. You lose the simplicity of blame. You lose the identity that made your suffering meaningful. You gain something else, responsibility. Not responsibility for what happened, responsibility for what happens next. And that responsibility can feel heavier than the trauma itself. This is why Jung said many people would rather be sick than be whole. Because sickness organizes life for you. Wholeness asks you to organize it yourself. This is where the sentence, "I am not what happened to me," reveals its final edge. It is not liberation alone. It is a demand to live consciously in a world that rewards unconsciousness. A demand to choose, even when choice is uncomfortable. And now we reach the final question. What does it actually mean to choose who you become without creating another mask? What does a life guided by awareness look like when there is no script to follow? That is where this journey ends, and where the real work begins. At this point, the question is no longer theoretical. It is no longer about understanding Jung. It is about living with what that understanding demands. Because choosing who you become does not mean designing a new personality. It does not mean rewriting your past, and it does not mean escaping your wounds. Jung never believed in reinvention. He believed in integration. To choose who you become is to stop outsourcing your life to unconscious reactions. It is to accept that what happened to you shaped your instincts, but it does not have the right to dictate your future. This is where most people misunderstand freedom. They imagine freedom as self-expression, as doing whatever feels authentic. Jung saw something more precise. Freedom is the ability to respond instead of react. Reaction belongs to the past. Response belongs to the present. Reaction is fast. Response is conscious. Reaction feels justified. Response feels deliberate. And deliberation is uncomfortable because it exposes you to uncertainty. When you are no longer ruled by your complex, life does not become easier, it becomes clearer. And clarity is demanding. You begin to notice how often you used anger to avoid vulnerability, how often you used withdrawal to avoid disappointment, how often you used control to avoid fear. These strategies once protected you. Now they limit you. Choosing who you become means allowing those strategies to retire, not by force, but by awareness. Jung emphasized this again and again. Whatever you fight in yourself, you strengthen. Whatever you observe, you loosen. Observation drains unconscious energy, not instantly, but steadily. This is why true change feels slow, because it is real. As awareness deepens, the psyche reorganizes itself. The persona becomes less rigid, the shadow becomes less explosive, the archetype loses its monopoly. You are no longer just the orphan, or the warrior, or the savior. You can visit those modes without living inside them. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not becoming special, but becoming whole. Wholeness is not purity. It includes contradiction. It includes ambiguity. It includes parts of yourself you once rejected. And this is where many people hesitate. Because wholeness removes moral simplicity. You can no longer say, I am only the victim. I am only the good one. I am only reacting. You begin to see your participation, your choices, your avoidance, not with self-hatred, but with clarity. And clarity changes how you move through the world. Relationships change, because you are no longer asking others to heal what you refuse to face. Work changes, because you are no longer using achievement to compensate for inner emptiness. Conflict changes, because you are no longer fighting shadows that belong to your own past. This does not make life calm, it makes it honest. Jung believed honesty was the foundation of psychological health, not positivity, not comfort, honesty. The honesty to say, yes, this happened to me, and also, no, this is not all I am. This is where the famous sentence finally lands. I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become. Not a slogan, a daily practice, because choice does not happen once. It happens every time you pause, every time you notice, every time you refuse to let the past decide for you. Sometimes you will fail, you will react, you will fall back into old patterns. Jung did not see this as regression, he saw it as feedback. Awareness is not linear, it deepens through repetition. Each time you notice a reaction faster, you reclaim a piece of your life. Each time you choose response over reaction, you weaken the old structure, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, your life stops repeating itself, not because the past disappeared, but because it no longer owns you. This is the quiet transformation no one talks about. No dramatic breakthrough, no final healing, no permanent certainty. Just a growing ability to live consciously. Jung believed that meaning emerges from this process, not imposed meaning, lived meaning, meaning born from responsibility, from integration, from facing life as it is, not as your wounds taught you to see it. This is why he said, people do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Darkness does not mean evil, it means what you avoided seeing. And once seen, it no longer controls you. So if you are listening to this and something feels unsettled, that is not a problem. It means the old identity is loosening. You are not losing yourself. You are encountering yourself without the story. And that encounter is the beginning of a different life. Not one free of pain, but one no longer dictated by it. What happened to you matters. It always will. But who you become is still unfolding. And that unfolding is the only place where freedom lives. If this stayed with you longer than expected, don't rush to explain it away. Sit with it. That pause, That moment of awareness is already a choice.